So the agenda for today is being transparent, learning about your why. Next one, we're going to talk about knowing your people, emphasize an ideal outcome, which includes timelines, and then seek feedback. Now, one of the reasons I asked today, tell me about yourself. Why are you here? Because I want to learn your why. And what we do is we align our messages together so we can move forward. Because if there's a resistance, then the question is, how can we gain buy-in? What is the resistance? Where is it coming from? Because if you're listening to me or if you're connecting with anyone else through a space of resistance, annoyance, let's say even defensiveness or not even believing, then how will any information be penetrating within both of us? And it's very important to be open and transparent with your why. Now, in the chat box, again, I would love to know, how are you doing? And there's reason to my questions. I'm going to tell you how I'm doing while you guys are writing. I'm still stuck on the events that happened in the Oscars. I am curious to know what your thoughts are when it comes to the Oscars. So much conversation has come from this, and it's like a ripple from a pebble in a pond because it's spreading all over the globe. And in a sense, this is about gaining buy-in. Will, with his actions and words, has created buy-in, and there's everyone having an opinion now. They're taking sides. And when you take sides, you're not open to really seeing the situation and how we can all come together.
So what we're hearing from the folks here today is that Cherie says she's doing great. Andrew said pretty good today, even though the weather says otherwise. Zoe said she's tired. Yvette said she's worried about her own health and she's working on it. And that's sort of how people are doing right now.
Okay, so the reason I ask this is because how do we get people to help you in your life, in your why, in your purpose, if we're not communicating more than I'm fine, I'm great? And I'm to blame in this as well. I was lucky enough to meet this person who's the #1 sports agent. And unfortunately, I don't know his name, but I got his picture. But I didn't ask him anything. I didn't say, hey, I know some great people who you might be interested in. I was just, hi, how are you? Thank you for the picture. Why are we not moving beyond our comfort zone in communicating? So when someone says, how are you? Now there's a balance that I have to take, right? Do I say something's worrying and it's on my mind, and then ask, first of all, you have to make sure that the space is available for this communication and it's proper. But am I open enough to seeing how can you help me in my why? I want to gain buy-in by sharing with you, this is what's going on with me right now. I'm having a dilemma with X, Y, and Z. So for example, Evelyn just shared with us, she's having some health issues. And that makes us all supportive in a sense where if we have a network that can help her, maybe then we could all come together as a community. So it's very important when someone's asking you, how are you doing, to tune in. Am I ready to share really what's going on? Do I have some thoughts on my mind about job progression? Do I have thoughts on my mind about vendors or needing some speakers or needing anything? How can I help you? So I want you to think about next time when someone asks you, how are you doing? To really tune into your why and communicate and ask them for their why. Step 1. Being transparent about your why. This is one of the reasons why we went into this conversation. Later on in this afternoon, we're going to break out into rooms because I want you to start building community and connecting to your own why with some leading questions. And when I talk about transparency about your why, I mentioned already about the Will Smith situation and Chris Rock. For me, what was going on in that scenario is Will Smith is learning how to expand his awareness, how to be more clear instead of being the actor, the perfect person there with the facade of everything is perfect. He's trying to be more authentic. He's shifting into this role. But because this is a new experience for him, in my opinion, I think he wasn't sure about, in emotional intelligence, you talk about the self-regulation. I don't think he was aware of how he can hold in that self-regulation aspect. And then he reacted in a way that was not appropriate. Now, the question is, how many times have we acted inappropriately, or we said something, be it from the position of Chris Rock or the position of Will Smith. Instead of judging or taking sides, I encourage us to be curious. Be curious how we have each played a position in each individual, Chris Rock, Will Smith, and the audience. Because if you see, the audience also has their role to play within this scenario. And when you're transparent about your why, you gain buy-in with the people around you, because what I've noticed is more than not, people are willing to help. People are willing to come together and see how they can serve. Now, do you think a perfect work environment is attainable? Yes or no? And with the emojis on the below, raise your hand if you've had an experience where you've had a perfect work environment. No. Andrew wrote no. No, perfect is subjective. Rachel says yes. So I would love for you to, if you feel comfortable enough, to get off the mute and share an experience, a brief experience, and we could see how we can support you in recreating this. Because what I've found is we repeat patterns. We have different people coming into our lives, but the patterns seem to be repetitive. And there's a special message in each experience and moment for us individuals. So, Andrew, would you like to share an example?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So I think, well, in relation to, so kind of answering the question, so in relation to like a perfect work environment, I think it's really challenging to think about a perfect scenario because, I mean, there's quite many factors to consider, such as, you know, differing expectations or conflicting personas, different work styles. I think it's just many factors to quite consider before being able to attain a better work environment that's suitable to everyone.
And how do you feel to communicate these differences? Because this is where I want to emphasize how we can take a role in this position.
I think a lot of it really has to do with speaking up and having these conversations, not just with colleagues, but also with supervisors, having a conversation with like the greater organization as a whole, and thinking about how we can achieve goals that are beneficial to everybody's bottom line.
Thank you, Andrew, for sharing. And the reason I bring this up is because there is no perfect environment. There's no perfect environment in your home. There's no perfect environment within yourself. Even within yourself, you're having issues. The whole key is about self-regulation, recognizing the people around you, and looking at yourself, self-awareness. I have had a situation in the past where I had to fire someone, and it was so hard for me to communicate this to the individual that it became elongated and it wasn't very clear. So I think in order to have a perfect work environment, perfect, quote unquote, it's about taking accountability. How can I communicate in a way that doesn't have to put you down, doesn't have to put me down, but ends up having us come together with an understanding of roles within your role and my role, and a timeline, like I mentioned earlier. Now, step 2, know your people. Oftentimes I'm communicating with people when they go into the office and I ask them, do you know the name of the janitor? Do you know the role of this person who sits in the cubicle beside you? And now that we're home, how many of us have been on a Zoom call where we're really not, where we're learning, right, about the people we're working with? Do we know about their personal life? Because unfortunately, people say, leave your emotions at the door. But it's very easy to say that. But the moment you get triggered, again, like in the Oscars, where Will Smith was triggered, how do we move forward from that position? I would say, know your people. There is such a thing as empathy, recognizing someone's story. Now, people want to talk about Jada Pinkett Smith, where she had alopecia. But even if she didn't have alopecia, does it matter? Something was said that was deflating. How do we build with our communication versus break? And I would like to bring again to the audience, to you guys, how do you build in your relationships with your language? And how do you break a relationship with your language? There's parameters, I would like to say, when we're speaking with each other. The first step I like to do is connect to my body. How am I feeling? Am I feeling out of control, angry? Am I aware of the breath that's going on within myself? When I'm breathing, I'm more clear. My language is smoother, my language is slower, and my language is more direct. Now, can I recognize this in another individual? Can I see when their voice is heightened? Can I see when they're getting aggressive or unclear with their language? That's when I step in as an individual and say, would you like a moment to breathe? There's no attack here. Let me reset. So oftentimes, for example, our cell phones get overloaded. Our computers stop working. It says loading. We as humans do the same thing. We can get overloaded, overwhelmed. When you know the people around you, when you care enough to see what can I do or how do you work best, then we can take a moment to pause and say, okay, perhaps you're not at your best right now. Would you like to take a pause? This is how you can support inclusive language. I've seen a lot of people in work areas where they get very defensive, they get offended. And this is the perfect moment to reset and say, pause, let's pause one moment. What's going on here? Oftentimes, because we don't have the tools to communicate this way, our first solution is out. That's one of the reasons why you see the Great Resignation happening. How many people are communicating their why to their employers? How many employers are listening to their people's why? And when these two don't connect, then you have that miscommunication that's going on and people are leaving. So when you know your people, you understand what their motivating factor is. And other than putting in the time, other than really listening, there's no quick shortcut to caring about another individual, hearing their name, learning their family, learning about their pet. Maybe someone in the family is sick. I had a friend, a colleague that I was working with who wasn't totally present because her cat was dying and her cat died the next day. So when we get to know our people, the people will come back and they'll work tenfold for you because they feel like you have their back. How many of you get along perfectly? Or let's even change that. How many of you get along very well with your entire family, coworkers, staff, or people around you? I like to say for myself, we have a message here from Rachel. Definitions of words also matter. People may think one is defensive, but that person may just want to explain him or herself for being misunderstood. Exactly, correct. So for example, me, I'm a little bit dyslexic. And because I'm a little dyslexic, I read slower. And I speak a lot about unconscious bias. Because I speak slower, because I read slower, there are some people who have an interpretation that I'm mentally slower, or I have no idea because I haven't asked. But then what I've done in the past is I pulled myself out of reading. So I didn't feel included. That's why I talk a lot about inclusion. I felt very excluded. I put it upon myself because I didn't take the reins in my own hands to communicate how I was feeling. Instead, I pulled myself out of the scenario. So I want to bring this up to everyone. When we're talking with family members, when we're talking with staff members, is there something that they're hiding? And that's why it's so important to know about them. Get to really ask them questions, because when you come at someone with an open heart, you'd be surprised how much they share, because we usually come with each other with an armor. And when someone comes to you with just openness, there's an energetic connection there that feels that there's no judgment. Now, how do we make this dream come true? How do we make the dream of perfection come true? It can't come true unless you are the one to start looking at yourself. I talk about accountability a lot because in my life, in the past, I've always seen the obstacles. I've always seen how I couldn't do something because blank. And then I started looking about self-regulation, self-awareness, self-reflection, and how am I causing my situation in my life to happen from the decisions I'm making? Because this is very important. Whether you're conscious of it or not, every decision you're making is an active choice to step in or to step out, to communicate or to not to communicate, to build or to break. And this is where I would like to support really inclusive language. This is where the dream comes in because it's about you. Now, step 3, emphasize ideal outcomes and timelines. Going back to our original question, how are you? What is it that you really want to accomplish? There's something that's driving you forward. You want to build relationships. Do you want to build your network? Are you building a community? Are you building a family? What is it that you want? Because this is where we come out to support you. But there has to be an ideal timeline because along the way, there's many detours. And so I usually speak about it like this. Your kitchen has juice. Your juice has run out. So you need to go to the supermarket to get more juice. But along the way, there's many detours in the road. You can say, oh, I need gas. Oh, look, there's a shopping store. I want to go here. Oh, are you focused and driven and saying, no, I'm not going to allow the detours in my life, which is, let me not talk to this individual. I don't have to really communicate. Let me avoid. Let me be aggressive. Let me put up a wall. So there's many detours. What is it that we really want to achieve? And when we're aimed toward achieving that, nothing is going to stop us being it 1 day, 1 year, 10 years. The people who have made it is because they've seen the detours in the road and they've not let it deter them. And I want to bring that up because many times in life, we do have many detours. I myself have had many situations in life where I could get discouraged, but it's that motivation, inward motivation of connecting my why to the other people's why around me and recognizing that we each have a message that we need to evoke from each other. So I like to see it as a jigsaw puzzle. If each of us are a part of that jigsaw puzzle, then we each have a unique space and purpose in that puzzle. No one piece is more important than the other. No one piece can be replicated, even though you try to fit it into other parts, you know that? But and then when one piece is missing, the piece is incomplete. That's how I see our world, our society. And when we know each other's why, when we connect to transparency, and when we have an ideal outcome to come together with full purpose with each of us, then we're creating inclusion. If you look at leaders throughout history, they each have these things in common. They have a vision. So I ask you, what's your vision? They have direction. They have roles that everyone is going to play. If you see in the image that I have here below, this person is pointing here, this person is pointing here. Each one of us has a unique gift. So I'll give a story. I was at a football game with my boyfriend. And my boyfriend is watching, the crowd, and I'm watching the crowd. And he says, do you notice that the scoreboard is broken and that field, that equipment there is rusted? And I said, no, I didn't notice that. He's like, well, you should notice that. And I said, did you notice that this family down here brought their cousin and their grandmother and they're cheering for number 21? He said, no, I didn't notice that. I said, so should I make you wrong for not noticing that? Or should you recognize that I noticed something uniquely different than you? And together we put more pieces of the puzzle together. Because when we do that, we get buy-in from the people around us. We start discovering the unique gifts each person brings to the table. I offer EQ assessments, and in the EQ assessments, we can see where people are high in self-awareness or low in it, whether they're high in self-regulation or low, because all of this creates more balance. And we can start learning how to put the pieces together and include others to the table with their unique gifts and develop them even better. And lastly, the timeline. I think the timeline is very important because what happens is people can get demotivated, like Linda said in the entry. When you don't have a timeline, people can get discouraged when they don't see their efforts paying off. So kind of like going to the gym. The biggest issue is you don't go to the gym, lift up 100 pounds and say, where's the muscle? It really takes time, dedication, vision. What's my role? How do I eat? What am I supposed to do? How often do I come here? And then there is a timeline also. So it's very important. And step 4, I think is utmost importance is to seek feedback. Now, during the Oscars, everyone was watching what was happening, but how many people said anything? I was sitting in the audience one day of someone speaking from the podium, and the person's microphone was not working. While I was in the audience, people were turning to each other saying, we can't hear him. Doesn't he realize he can't be heard? Someone even said, why come here if we can't hear him? So instead of being passive, remember I said every decision we're making, either passively or aware, we're creating our life. I raised my hand and he said yes, because it was so weird. Out of 200-300 people, I'm the only one raising my hand. I said, we cannot hear you. Can you speak up in the microphone? How many of us can step up? It is odd. It is different. It is counterintuitive to societal norms. But it's time that we need to seek and give feedback. If we notice something in a meeting, do you stay quiet or do you bring it up? And there's no need to have to bring up something in a way that's insulting or humiliating for others, but there is a subtle way of saying it. And I'll give you this example. I was in a meeting where the boss was a female. The majority of the people in the room were female. There was 2 men. And all the females asked a question. One of the men asked a question. All the females asked a second question. The man went to ask a second question and she pointed him out and she told him, can you wait your turn and let someone else ask? Immediately, I could see the man become deflated because one of my skill sets is energy. And I turned to him and I told him, take a breath. And why did I say that? Because that breath is that reset, because he immediately was so angry because we all saw it. I could see in the room that the other people recognized we had all had a second chance, but he had not. After the meeting, I approached the female boss and I asked her if she was open for feedback. And she said yes. I explained to her what I witnessed. Her first reaction was being defensive. And understand, people are not going to immediately be like, oh, thank you for your feedback. They could become aggressive, defensive. They could pull back. They could close up. They could do a myriad of things. The question is, are you offering the information from a place of love and observation, non-judgment, curiosity? Or are you saying, hey, you did X, Y, and Z. You should be accountable, etc. How are you offering the information? So I gave her opportunity to process the information, kind of like when you're eating food. Put the food in your mouth, process it, take a moment to let it digest and see now how you can move forward. But I always encourage people to either seek feedback or give feedback, because that's the only way that we can improve. I cannot see what you see about me. I can only see from the outside and then have some self-awareness within myself, but it takes my commitment to move in that direction. And so the question is for you, are you willing to seek feedback? Are you willing to hold it? Does it feel right? Because oftentimes just because someone is telling you something doesn't mean it's right. They could also be seeing it from their filtered lens, from their own various perspectives. So this is an opportunity truly to connect on a message, on an alignment of goals. Where do we want to move forward from this? What is the purpose of the feedback that I gave this individual? I gave it to her so she could see herself the way we saw her. Because I'll tell you what happened next. The group was more demotivated, and that man, that employee, he ended up leaving. He resigned. He didn't communicate further, and she didn't communicate further. So every one of us is taking decisions. And are we building or are we breaking? And this is where that shifting the way we gain and offer feedback. Now, I wanted to tell a story with the numbers. 96% of people would like a more empathetic approach to communication in the workplace. 86% of people blame company failures on poor communication. 74% of people feel like they are missing out on the news and information. And 39% blame the company. Oh, I'm sorry, on poor communication. I think there was a mistake there. My point here is we need to be more open about the stories we're telling, about the numbers we're telling, about how we're feeling. There's burnout going on everywhere. People are not communicating how they're feeling. People are dropping the ball, they're quitting, they're becoming aggressive, and they're blaming. And some of them are taking on way too much and they're not communicating. How can you support me in this new endeavor? So I want to bring this up to you because where are you? What's your place in your roles in your organization? How can you bring forward greater communication like Andrew was talking about? Now, I have a third question. How many times have you resigned or have you moved jobs to avoid dealing with conflict?
So Zoe said once. And I would also just, call out someone else that had a really interesting comment earlier. Rachel said, definition to words also matter. People may think one is defensive, but that person may just want to explain him or herself for being misunderstood. And also, let's see. Oh, I thought this was great by Zoe. She said, I've never worked in a perfect environment, but I've worked in great environments in a past industry. Perfect is subjective. At my current company, many employees are threatened by the idea of an inclusive environment because they feel like they have to act PC, politically correct, and they don't feel like they're able to bring their authentic selves to work.
And there's also Rebecca who wrote, I left. I felt it was too toxic and it wasn't going to change. Agreed with Rebecca, Danny wrote. Yeah. And so this is a true thing. We do feel like there's certain environments that are toxic. And this is neither, again, something to blame, but it's something to bring about because people, like organizations, are slow to change. Is your organization changing? And when you start removing yourself from toxic environments, you start recognizing I require a different level of energy around me. But the question also lies with how are you bringing the level up? I've attended certain gatherings where it is a D&I space, but it's been very angry. And I've had to go in and communicate how I felt. This is not an inclusive arena for me. This doesn't feel inviting. And if anyone has a different opinion, they might be afraid to offer it. Because when the opinions are so strong, this is right, this is wrong, this is bad, this is good, then we're not inviting conversation. Rebecca wrote, you can also recognize patterns in people based upon your past experiences. Well, and I would like to invite you to ask, is it patterns in people or something that you need to learn that you're attracting the same kind of person? Because there's an opportunity here for all of us. There's an opportunity for me to learn about myself. And I often ask myself, why am I in this position again? What am I supposed to learn from this moment? If I label an experience as good or bad, and I'm still learning this, then I'm removing opportunities for me to gain greater insight. Because it's kind of like I've just filtered the information through a certain lens. But when I remove that lens, to be able to really turn around and get a greater image of what's happening, then I learn more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, it was both, right? So it was me, and then it was the person. And then I learned that I needed to have a voice and actually speak up for myself. And so I first, because I was new to that company, I first engaged the few people I did know. And then they had an ERG group. So I was able to connect with them and find some people that I felt safe with. And then everybody kept saying the same thing. And the sponsor of our group, I actually met with him, who was also an attorney. And he helped me get validation. So there's a part I owned, right? Like, I have to decide what I'm going to do with this. What am I going to stay? Am I going to find something else? Or do I speak up and try to work through it? And then to go to HR. And then I did end up going to HR and trying to work through it. But one of his statements also was, well, this company has, unfortunately, a lot of, as his words, shitty managers. So I'm like, okay, that tells me that means things might not change even by going to HR. So eventually I ended up getting laid off at the end of 2020. So I was forced, but my goal was then to actually move out of that department, because I realized the person's behaviors I was noticing, it wasn't just with me. I started noticing, as you said, you're aware, and started looking around and watching how she talked to other people and how she treated people. Even sometimes it wasn't necessarily what she said, it was how she said it and her tone, and how she kind of almost seemed like certain people with certain levels, she would look down on and talk to them differently, including her own boss. So it was definitely lessons learned.
Thank you. Rebecca? Thank you. No, it's true. We are noticing things on a subconscious level or on a conscious level. The question is, what are we doing about it? And we have a comment here from Danny saying, I think in this conversation, it's important to note that not everyone might be safe speaking up. Exactly. And that's why it's so important to gain buy-in, to communicate with other people. Are you having the same experience as I am? Are you understanding this? Am I seeing something different? Or is it really how I'm perceiving it to be? And this is where the courage comes into play. And I have as strategies, curiosity, courage, and communication, because I feel it's important to get the buy-in. Sometimes I think I see something and I'm not right. It's not really the right experience. I'm filtering it from my experience. But when I gain buy-in and I ask, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? Then I make it more inclusive to the perceptions and understandings of other people, whom is not my perception. It's someone else. Buy-in, for example. There's another message here. I actually returned to a toxic work environment after experiencing harassment and retaliation as a manager, previously an individual contributor. Would you like to share a little bit more, Zoe?
Sure. So, my current job, I am the sales manager of a branch office in the construction industry. So, branch offices tend to have very different cultures and work environments, and the corporate office is just due to less supervision, different standards. A lot of times they run as if they're a small business, and especially in the construction industry, it's very white male dominated. So behaviors just weren't really up to my standards. And I used to work in pharmaceutical research, which was actually a female dominated industry and company. So it was just very different coming here. And when I was an individual contributor, I experienced harassment by some of our customers in the field. I was in a field role. Some of our contractors, and then internally. I was a pregnant and then breastfeeding mom. One of my coworkers told me that if I get a room to pump in, he should, and I'm just going to quote him, he should get a room to jack off in. And when I took that to my manager, a little while later, because I didn't feel safe bringing it up at the time, my manager retaliated against me. So I left. And when my former manager and that employee were no longer there, I was recruited to be the sales manager, and actually took the role because I saw it as a great opportunity to kind of nip some of these environment issues in the bud, because our organizational health is pretty poor at the branch level. It shows obviously that the toxic work environment, even though it worked well for very few people, even they weren't happy with their jobs. So, trying to put better processes in place and create a more inclusive environment. Right now, we're more diverse than we were before, but we're also, have a leadership team that's stronger about upholding, safety practices and, just standards for the work environment that allow us to retain talent, at all levels.
Yes, thank you, Zoe, for sharing that, because this is why it's so valuable to include more people's voices to the table. You're bringing in that voice that says, this is not okay behavior, this is not okay language. And it's so needed. I don't want to say I'm sorry for your experience, because it is an experience that we each take into our lives. We have so many experiences so that we can learn and grow from it. I feel that you've probably learned, what are your boundaries? How do you communicate differently? So every experience really works toward us if we can see it and how it can move the needle, so to speak, in our own life and in our own society, moving it forward. So thank you for sharing your story. There's been some horror stories that I've heard in the industry with women, how managers believe it's okay to communicate. And I think this is going back to the Oscar story. We're going to see a shift in how we joke. It used to be okay to joke about people. And with what just happened, I think it's showing a new level of awareness that we're having as a society world round, that this is not okay anymore. We have a few more minutes. I wanted to break everyone up into a breakout room if we have 5 minutes, where I just ask a question. But I think, Linda, you wrote something in the chat box.
Yeah, happy to break everyone into breakout sessions if you'd like to do that.
Yes, and we have a question that I posted. Do you have the questions there, Linda? Here's the question. What's an obstacle that you overcame in your life, both personally and professionally? And what was it that you did to invoke buy-in, inclusive language, support from those around you? And I would love you guys to dive into a conversation, because this is how we start building community. Like Zoe just shared with us her experience, and Andrew shared with us his experience. We get to hear from them, from these people a little bit more, and you're now in my heart. So I would like to do that in this group. And last, I want to leave you with this quote. If you want to motivate others, don't manipulate, cultivate. Ultimately, it's about building trust and credibility. When you are transparent, when you ask for feedback, when you want to know your people and want to know their why, then you're creating trust and credibility. When people feel trusted, when they feel you have their back, then they work with you to move your vision forward. And again, we want to recognize toxic environments. We want to see how can we gain buy-in with the people around us within toxic environments. And if we have tried and worked it out there, we do have an opportunity to shift, to move out of these environments if we can't fix them. But the world is being called on now to look at how we're cultivating the environments around us and take accountability. What can we bring to a space, and how can we own it and make it better? So let me know if anyone has any questions, but I want to thank you all for joining me today. And I'm looking forward to feedback, to connecting with you, I put my LinkedIn. Yes, I put my LinkedIn in the chat box. Thank you, Luz. This was a great reminder of how to enroll people in our vision. Yes, thank you. I totally agree. Sometimes we need that reminder. Sometimes we're so geared on our purpose, but it's also about everybody else's purpose as well. So thank you for that. And I look forward.